Hello, welcome back to Casablanca. In this episode, seeing as this is episode 70, which is a special episode, I am covering the Santa Claus franchise. I know what you're probably thinking, didn't I already cover the Santa Claus my first season? That I did. This is going to cover the rest of the franchise, because there are 2 sequels and a TV series. And I am a fan. I'm not sure if I should probably have re-listened to that first episode before doing this, because I don't remember if I talked about the sequels or my thoughts on them at the time. But basically, the second one, it was a good follow-up. It kind of makes sense. There was, they look at that card that you had picked off of Santa Claus. Whenever it said, the person who picked up this card and puts on the clothes or now becomes the Santa Claus. Well, there's another clause in there, the Mrs. Claus. You have to get married? And so, the whole plot of the second movie is, he turns back into Tim Allen. He turns back into Scott Calvin. Scott Calvin? Scott, I'll just say Scott. He turns back into Scott, which, SC, they make a point of pointing that out in every movie, in every iteration of it. And so he turns back into Scott, looks like Tim Allen, and he goes back into the real world, and he has until Christmas Eve to find a wife. Good luck. No pressure. Or Santa, or Christmas will be over forever. Because, it's one of those movies. It's like, if you don't do this, Christmas is dead! And I thought it was an okay movie. It was, I didn't like it the first time I saw it, and I still kind of don't, simply because of the ending. Because, the end of the movie, basically, I'm just going to go ahead and, I'm going to spoil both movies here. Not so much the show, because the show's new, and, yeah. I'm going to spoil both movies of the sequels, Santa Claus 2 and Santa Claus 3. So at the end of the movie, they have to get back to the North Pole, and then, and so Scott, he falls in love with the principal of his son's school, which, that's a little weird, but whatever. And he goes back to the North Pole. They're still not married. It's Christmas Eve, and oh no, how are they going to get back to the North Pole? And then, you know how they get back to the North Pole? By getting back to the North Pole. It's literally the first time I saw it, I was probably, I was gonna say 10, but no, I would say 12. I'll just say 12. I was probably 12 when it came out. I don't remember when. It was I should probably do the usual. Santa Claus 2 is a 2002 Christmas movie directed by Michael Lembeck and starring Tim Allen, Elizabeth Mitchell, and Eric Lloyd. There. 2002. How old was I in 2002? Yes, 13, 14, I don't know. Point is, I was really young, and even at the time when I watched it, I was like, wait, that was a rushed ending. It was, the movie leading up to that was okay. But literally, that ending just ruined the whole movie for me. Like, that, and I didn't like it. I did not like it. So that's why I'm rushing past Santa Claus 2, because I never liked it. And so, Santa Claus 3 it's called Santa Claus 3: The Escape Clause. It's a 2006 Christmas film directed by Michael Lembeck and starring Tim Allen, Elizabeth Mitchell, and Martin Short. And this time, it is a little better. All the trailers focused on the escape clause part. So basically, Martin Short plays Jack Frost, and he wants to be Santa Claus because the mystical court place don't want him to be on their team. And he's like, but I'm one of you. And they're like, nah, we're good. And so he wants to steal Santa's powers. And so what he does is there's this weird rule. There's so many, just every movie and every show and every time that you see like another iteration of this franchise, they introduce a new rule, a new clause, a new thing. And suddenly now, like one of the most important things holding all the Santa Clauses together is the snow globe room. And each Santa Claus gets their own snow globe, and it's like the source of their power or something. And so, and there's this clause, it's called the escape clause. And what you do is if at any point while you're Santa Claus, you decide you don't want to be Santa Claus anymore, you just hold your snow globe and say, I don't want to be Santa Claus anymore. And then it reverses time, and it makes it like it never happened. And so what Martin Short does, what Jack Frost does, is that's his plan. He gets a snow globe, and he makes him say it. They're like standing on a balcony, and he holds, like Tim Allen's holding the snow globe, and he says it. He just can't, like, that plan couldn't have gone more perfectly for Martin Short. And but this one has more of like a fantasy element. It kind of more embraces the mystical side of the whole Santa Claus thing. There's very little time spent in the real world. And what I like about this, I didn't like it the first time I saw it, where the escape clause part is near the end. It's like the third act. And so there's a whole movie of build-up, character development, story growth, and stuff like that. Maybe I said that backwards. But anyway, it builds up to the escape clause part. It doesn't just, it's like, hey, I want to do this, let's do that. And then the whole movie is that. So when it actually gets to rewind time, you actually relive the scene from the first movie where Santa Claus falls off the roof in front of Scott's house. But this time, Jack Frost picks up the clothes before Tim Allen comes outside. And then it like rewinds back to the present where Scott was never Santa Claus. And like the world is basically what Jack Frost does is he commercializes it, and he turns the North Pole into like an amusement park, and he takes the fun out of Christmas. And like that whole section, I'm gonna say it's about half an hour. It's resolved very quickly. What Scott does is he finds these pens that record audio, and so Martin Short was like, aha, I know what you're going to do, but you're not going to get me to say I don't want to be Santa Claus anymore. And Scott goes, what? Say what? I'm not going to make you say what? And you can see him press record on the pen, and then Martin Short goes, I said, you're not going to make me say I don't want to be Santa Claus anymore. And yeah, like 5 minutes later, Martin Short's holding the snow globe, and then Tim Allen plays the recording. The recording is all it takes. It rewinds time. He picks up the thing, goes back to the present. It's resolved. It's resolved in like 5 minutes. It's okay. This one is a quick ending too, but it builds up to it. It doesn't just jump to it. It actually, like I said, you can see everything coming together, and it makes more sense than Santa Claus 2's rushed ending. I didn't like Santa Claus 2, still kind of don't. And, but my favorite of all three movies is definitely the first one. The first one is a major Christmas classic, and I watch it almost every year. I love it. Now, getting on to the TV show, when they announced they were making a Santa Claus TV show, I was like, what? How are they going to continue this franchise? That doesn't make any sense. Well, they did that by giving them kids. And yes, I know we already had kids. New kids. So, Santa Clauses is a Christmas series on Disney Plus created by Jack Burditt and starring Tim Allen, Elizabeth Mitchell, Austin Kane, and Elizabeth Allen Dick. Yep. Tim Allen's daughter plays his daughter in the Santa Clauses. And I'm not going to spoil anything in this show. Each season, there's 2 seasons currently. They haven't announced a 3rd season. Okay, here's a good thing. They have not officially canceled this show, but they've also not announced a 3rd season. But if they were going to do a 3rd season this year, they would have already done it. They would have either done it already or announced it already, and they've done neither. But the good thing is, they have not officially canceled this show. I want the show to keep going because I love the characters, I love the story, I love where they're going with it. And the first season, basically, he felt like his magic was diminishing, and he felt, oh, I guess it's time to retire from being Santa Claus after like 30 years. And so he's looking for a replacement. And yeah, that's basically what that was. Okay, if I feel like, I'm just going to stick with the synopsis from like how they gave it, because I feel like if I talk about too much of the show, I'm going to spoil everything. But I will say that kind of like the synopsis kind of is like what I said, is he's trying to retire. He wants to retire. He feels like it's time to retire, and he's trying to find a worthy successor. And he kind of does, but it's not very good. They didn't put it in the trailer, so I don't know if I should say it here, because again, like, it came out 2 years ago, which is usually long enough. But like, I know that not a lot of people know about this show, because when I was talking about it, I was like, the Santa Claus franchise. They're like, oh yeah, the 3 movies. I was like, I've done the first episode. I've done the first movie. I'm going to do the 2 sequels and the show. And everyone's like, what show? And then, so they didn't really promote this. I only knew about this show because I'm like big into like the movie space. And like, I see all the news. So I don't know what's popular and what's not popular unless I bring up something. And everyone's like, oh yeah, I want to see that. Or like, I've never heard of that. Like, how have you never heard of that? And and so I want to use this to get people to watch the show. It's 2 seasons. Each one has, I was going to say, a self-contained story. But but like, it continues. So like, the first season, like, he wants to retire, and he finds I'm going to say a temporary replacement. And the kids, Mrs. Claus, Scott, they make a point of mentioning that, like, Mrs. Claus doesn't have a first name, and that's like a plot point for her. Like Mrs. Claus doesn't even have a first name. So like, the whole family goes to the real world, and they detransition, and then back into real people. The 2 kids have never been to the real world, and so they don't know how to acclimate. And so there's a whole storyline there. And of course, because there's a 2nd season, that they end up going back to the North Pole. And then that storyline concludes, and there was a resolution, and I won't spoil anything because, again, I want people to watch this show. And then the 2nd season, because when they first announced the show, they said that's the whole point of the show is, he wants that. And I was like, so how are they going to... 2nd season, the Cribble Crabble Claus is the story. And basically, it was... there's a whole history of Santa Clauses. If you've seen the first 3 movies, you know that... Well, the first 3 movies. There's only 3 movies. If you've seen the movies, you know that, Scott... Obviously, Scott's not the first Santa. the Santa that he accidentally killed was not the first Santa. There's a whole history of Santa Clauses. And there is a Santa Claus that was stricken from the record and nobody talks about because he was kind of a dictator. And he was turned into a nutcracker or a statue or something. And he's found in the real world and accidentally brought back. And that's the storyline of the second season. I know it sounds really dark. It sounds like oh, that's a really dark story, and it is. Like, it is kind of a dark story. But the fun thing about this show, like, it's a very lighthearted show. Like, he is like, this evil character, but kind of comedically evil. Like, he has a weird voice, and he's like, when he's like interacting with like modern stuff, he's like, I think he does like, he plays like on a switch or something like that. He's a comical character, but he's evil. Like, you're not supposed to like him, and that's, wacky shenanigans ensues, and so I do highly recommend it. Both seasons and all 3 movies are on Disney Plus. You can watch the shows. You don't necessarily have to have seen the movies to enjoy the show, but it is, at least watch the. I was gonna say watch the first 2, but like, I don't want people to watch the second movie. Watch them whatever order you want. Nope, that's bad advice. Watch the movies, watch the show. It's a whole franchise. It's not... Okay, so it's an ongoing story, but it's not a consistent story. Like, there are characters in... Like, actually, all the elf characters in the show... All of the characters... The elves are supposed to be, like, thousands of years old, and it even shows whenever on the second season, it shows flashbacks to whenever that evil Claus was in power, and the characters that we know now in the present were there, but they weren't there in the 90s, in the early 2000s in those Santa Claus movies, because they're kids. They have to get kids to play the elves, and they age up, and so it does kind of bother me a little bit. Like, we have these characters that we know and like from the movies, and you could have just recast them. Like, oh, this is this person, but no, they just completely replaced the entire character, all the characters. But you get used to them. The characters are really good. Like, I have no complaints on the elf characters. Like, they really develop these characters, and you really like them by the end of the... Well, I was going to say, like, by the end of the second season, like, it takes 2 seasons to fully like them, but no, you do like them. It takes... For me, it took a couple episodes to get used to the characters. I'm like, wait, what? Where's that character? Where's this character? Whatever? And, yeah, you eventually get used to it, and these are the characters. They've been here all along. And... there is no real consistency. Even like kind of like the layout of the North Pole and stuff, and like the workshop. I was gonna say it's like they didn't have the rights, but it's literally Disney. So I don't know why they changed the look and feel of the North Pole. But again, you get used to it by the end. I think the only thing that really stays consistent from what I remember from the movies is the fireplace. The Clauses, Mr. and Mrs. Claus, in like their bedroom or like their main room that they're always in, they have this giant Chamber of Secrets like fireplace, and that always stood out to me in the movies. and it's here in the show. Other than that, nothing is really consistent with the movies visually, which is okay. You get used to it. I keep saying that, and I will always recommend these movies. As much as I dislike the second movie, I still recommend as a whole. I don't recommend the second movie on its own. I recommend it as a whole. Like, if you're going to watch the whole franchise, you're going to have to watch the second movie. Yeah. It's like, I don't like sauerkraut, but I like it in a Reuben. You gotta have sauerkraut in a Reuben if you're gonna have it. But you don't want it on its own. Plus, it's a sequel and it wouldn't make sense on its own, but you know what I'm saying. But I'm gonna leave it at that. It's a shorter special episode than normal. There's not a whole lot of Christmas things I could have done a special episode on, and this is the first thing that came into mind. So, and there's not really a whole lot there that I could talk about. So, cut.